All right, here we are. Stephen, it's great to do this with you.
Likewise, man. Welcome everybody. Happy what is it? Is it still Tuesday? Happy Tuesday.
I can't believe it's still Tuesday and only Tuesday. I'd love to hear, by the way, we'll give it a minute for folks to start trickling in. We'd love to hear in the comments where everyone is calling in from. Yeah, Steve. So we've got everyone in the U.S. probably like bookended. But yeah, because Stephen, new San Francisco resident, right?
We did, yeah. We just moved to SF 3 weeks ago. I won't show the rest of my room here, but we're still moving in very much. Oh, Lindsay, Toronto. Whew, nice to see you, Lindsay. Welcome. Wow, we got Cape Town, South Africa. Let's go. New York, Canada, Leeds, Boulder.
Leeds. I love it. So Stephen, my fun facts for the day is I'm a very small minority investor in Leeds United. So I love seeing the Leeds representation.
Amazing. Can you share how you got access to this very small minority investment in Leeds United?
Friend of a friend. It's the 49ers family, like the York family, as the control stake. So yeah,
it's awesome. Awesome.
But
Oxford,
amazing.
Still Alaska. Let's go. It is early in Alaska right now.
Well, we are super excited to kick this off with everyone. I guess I'm happy to start by doing some quick intros. So thank you to everyone that's showing up today. We had amazing turnout for this. You can see in the comments, but Stephen, like many hundreds, like almost 1,000 signups.
Yeah, like 1,000 signups, which is nuts. Thank you.
Amazing. So Stephen, do you want to like kick us off here and tell us a little bit about yourself and about Rillet?
Yeah, no, happy to. So my name's Stephen Hedlund, head of finance here at Rillet. If you haven't heard of Rillet, we're the AI native ERP. You can kind of imagine like if NetSuite were built today. So think about like all the things you really love about NetSuite, the multi-entity, consolidation, global presence, all of those pieces, but built for modern teams, right? So that means both like obviously table stakes, good UI, UX, but really like a platform built for scale. And really built with AI. It's like we've literally re-architected the GL, thought about it differently, thought about like how AI comes into the platform, how data comes in, all those details. And we support over 300 customers today, VC backed by Sequoia, Andreessen, and Iconic. We have public companies on platform. I know we have a few customers in the chat already. So if you're like, frankly, looking to get off your old ERP or just looking to implement AI directly in your ERP, let me know. But yeah, excited to chat today.
Perfect. And then my name is Craig Thompson, lead our finance function here at Aleph. Also see a bunch of familiar names of customers in the chat. And our focus is kind of the Rillet analog, but for FP&A. And a lot of our approach and what makes us different, I think there's an AI element, of course, but really the big thing for us is meeting people where they are and leveraging the best of technology to meet people where they are, whether that's beautiful dashboards, whether it's in Slack, in Teams, in Excel, in G Sheets, pretty unique way. We have bringing in all of your system integrations and linking all of that as well. But Stephen, we're not here to hawk software today. We're here to talk about leveraging AI in the broadest sense. And I think I'd love to hear from folks in the chat too about how you're using AI today, and if like scale of 1 to 10, how you'd self-rank. And it's going to be our goal today to, share some interesting things about how we're using AI, even screen sharing and showing some specific examples to try to meet everyone where they are.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, if you could drop in the chat, 1 to 10, how would you rate yourself on using AI in your, let's say, general workflows today? It doesn't have to be just finance. But our kind of goal here today, like we'll do some like pretty introductory stuff. I assume across the like 500 people we have in here, we've got wide varying levels of kind of AI, I guess like knowledge and scale here, right? So we're going to do some introductory, some will be more advanced. I see some 8s and 7s, like amazing. Feel free to drop questions in the chat, frankly, any time. And if like you see a question you know the answer to, just answer it. Like don't wait for us to do it. I see lots of 7 and 8s in here. Some of you probably know much more than I or Craig do about many of these things. So feel free to like answer each other's questions. Our goal here is to be a community and just be really helpful. We're also happy to do lots more of these. Eddie, I really want to know how you calculated 5.42. I'm guessing maybe you vibe coded your own calculator to help you with that, but let's explore.
Yeah, and I want to shout out Gregory Shaw for the 6-7 reference for any of us with small children. Thank you and no thank you at the same time, Greg. With that, just talking a little bit, Stephen, like state of AI in finance, like where do you kind of like see the landscape? How did you start approaching this problem, and what's next in the journey?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So from my view, I'd say like January of last year is when AI in finance like really kicked off. Is we saw it like in 2024, for example, accounting firms very skeptical of AI, and I'm not really sure what shifted. Like something happened in January. My assumption is kind of twofold. Is one, you had a lot of finance leaders look at their kind of budgets from 2024 and go, "Whoa, we're spending on things like Cursor and Windsurf for my developers. We're using AI for our customer service teams. We're using AI for our legal teams with things like Harvey." And they're like, where's mine? Right? Like all these other teams are having success. I'm literally spending budget dollars on these things. Like, where is my stuff? And that's what has really accelerated this trend. And frankly, I kind of expected it to die off in 2026. Like there's kind of this AI hype bubble. And then we had like 1,000 people sign up for this webinar. So I think the hype is still very much there. The question now is like, where do we apply it? Right? Like what actually works? I think what's interesting now is a lot of vendors are catching up here. And so like, AP tools like Brex and Ramp have AI agents directly in platform. Now we have agents directly in platform. Like there's lots of this happening in tools directly. And yes, Dan, thank you to your point. Like the models are actually better, right? Like Claude Code, for example, is very good right now. Google finally came out with a model that works, right? Like the models have gotten so much better, both in 2025, but even over the last months, that has really accelerated this trend. What's funny is like all of us are still asking, like, is this real? Right? Is this still just kind of hype, or is this real? We're all kind of still waiting for the bubble to pop. And like in some ways, like TBD if it does, right? But that's kind of what I see now. Yeah, like Claude's embedded in Excel now. Ramp just released some cool kind of Excel sheets directly. There's like a lot of things happening now. It's pretty exciting. I think in general, like this is probably the best time to be in finance and accounting, and not just because of AI, but like even in our stage, right? Like there's an ERP that finally exists now that's different. You have tools like Ramp or Bex building, folks like Aleph building like these very exciting new age tools. VC is like pouring money into finance and accounting tools finally, and we're going to get some really cool stuff, this year, but especially over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I love it. And really kind of like the spirit of all of this is, I think, the legacy of the finance professional is to care only about deterministic outcomes, which made us all really allergic to a lot of the initial work that LLMs were doing. And so the framework that we really want to apply today is, even in this non-deterministic world, what are some examples of workflows that maybe you're doing, maybe you don't even know that you're doing, where an LLM can come in and add like 100% value or 98% value, just like real ROI. So we're going to start by talking about some kind of like more for folks who are kind of like have done a lot of this stuff already, just some examples that, actually like customers of all of ours submitted, and we're going to talk about a little bit that we thought were great. Then we're actually going to shift into screen sharing and showing some more like how to get started, how to do some of this stuff, for folks who might be newer and might say like, this seems great, but there's a barrier of how to really get started. So pivoting to some of our favorite prompts that we highlighted. And by the way, for folks who signed up, you may have had an opportunity to already get this like AI prompting guide. But if you haven't, we'll get a link posted in the chat where you can download it and see kind of the full thing. But I think just to start, this one I use all the time when I am, usually I drop off my daughter at school in the mornings, and I have my 15-minute car ride where I'm going back to my house, trying to figure out like what are thoughts I want to organize. And the idea organizer is really great. This is available basically across all of your favorite LLMs. I think like ChatGPT's like interactive mode is pretty good, I'll just turn it on and I'll be driving and I'll talk about things that I want to organize. And ChatGPT will listen and have a full conversation. And at the end of the conversation, it'll write out for me in text a more distilled format, whether that's a way I want to communicate a particular concept, whether it's a Slack message I want to write or an email. It's really good at distilling kind of like free form thinking into much more actionable kind of like executive level commentary.
Yeah, we can stay here for a second. Like, kind of what I've seen here is we'll use this kind of for like board deck prep, or like maybe more board meeting prep. It's like I literally like record a long voice note and be just kind of talking stream of consciousness. Here's what I think is important. Here's what I like. It's good because I can just go all over the place, right? I can start here. Oh, I have this insight. I want to bring it back over here. I can then just take this and like put it into ChatGPT or Claude and help me then structure my thoughts and kind of pull something good. The other thing I'll also use this for is I do a lot of posting on LinkedIn. I write almost all of my posts myself by hand, mostly because I think the LLMs kind of suck on this posting, right? You can tell when something's been written poorly. But when it actually is most useful is when I can take a transcript of myself, where like, I don't know, I'll be on some call kind of talking about Rillet or talking about something we did, or maybe a customer story sharing, and I'm like, ooh, that was really good. Right. Like whatever, I don't know what I was drinking that morning or what, but like there's some like moment of gold that hits in that call. And I'm like, okay, I can turn that into a LinkedIn post or something, right? So I can then take that transcript from the call, load it into ChatGPT and say, okay, help me form a post for this. And then like I still spend 10 minutes editing that stuff because it still sucks, right? But it lets me take it from this point of like, oh, I have writer's block. I did something here. I want to convert it. It helps kind of bring it into that structured format and put something good there. Right. So I think the kind of two principles here to take away from this is one, like the context you give to it matters a lot, right? Like the more context you can give to it, the better. And then second, like it still needs work, right? You should never expect it to come out perfect, but that doesn't mean you just stop, right? That doesn't mean you stop using it. Like there's still a use case here, even if the output isn't perfect from the get-go.
And by the way, one of the ways that you can give these LLMs like context, kind of like standing context, is with a tool called projects. I'm sure there are a lot of folks who know how to use projects, but for folks who don't, we're actually going to do a live example of like building a project later on in the meeting. Stephen, this is one that stood out to you. I'll let you take it away.
Cool. Yep. And this is in the guide Aleph put together as well to kind of draft a technical accounting memo. This is kind of very similar as prior use case. Is like the context you put in will help so much, right? So in this case, to write a good accounting memo, we'll load in emails about the contract or about the vendor. We'll load the contract in itself, maybe any notes we've put together on it, any like related journal entries that are related to the entry itself. And then I'll give it very strict guidance about like, hey, keep this, to 4 pages or something, or else it just really goes and goes and goes, and it's very unhelpful. It's also helpful if you have prior memos you've written, so it kind of knows what it's looking for, right? So once again, like the more context you give to it, the better it's going to be. This is something that LLMs are actually really good at versus like a junior employee or like humans. The more context you give as a humans, it can tend to kind of we get too much, right? It becomes too much to review and things like that. AI doesn't really have that issue, right? It actually wants more context because then it gets better. And so giving it like more examples of memos here, providing more emails, providing more journal entries, like any more detail you can give here is only going to make it better. And then once again, it's not going to get you to 100% likely, but at least gets you to a point where it can be helpful. And then let's be honest, our auditors are probably going to put these memos into an LLM anyway on their side. But still worth it to spend that time reviewing it in detail before you kind of ship it to your auditors.
Amazing. And then this for me, and I'll show a live example of this too. This is like probably the single biggest like holy cow, like what's going on, use case that I love, which is a board deck reviewer. So I'll actually show an example later on of an app that our like founder CEO Albert built, and then I kind of like did a couple things on top of. But it literally is a place where you can upload like a Google Sheet presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, and it'll review like, hey, like there's text on slide 33 where the number doesn't tie to like slide 12. It can look into pictures and it can basically see, even if you like screenshotted or like inserted, an Excel, bar chart, it can look into the numbers in the chart and tick and tie that to text on different pages. This is like the nightmare scenario of like how much time do we all spend like trying to tick and tie numbers in various places, and just massive uplift from something like an LLM that can do not just like grammar but also kind of like helping as a reviewer for ticking and tying numbers. So I will show like another specific example of this later on, but man, this is one that's just like I can't believe it works as well as it does.
Yeah, when you told me you had this, I was stunned. I'm like, that doesn't work, right? Like, there's no way. Like, I'm continually impressed on both sides. Like, I'm both impressed by what I think AI should be able to do and can't do. Where I'm like, this should be really easy and it doesn't work, right? But then on the flip side, I'm really impressed with, like, I get surprised by this stuff. Where like I've built some websites in Lovable, for example, and I'll just like tell it to change the colors this way, or hey, put my logo in this spot, or do this or whatever, and I'm like, oh, wow, it worked. Like I was just throwing it out there expecting it not to work. This is where like using these tools, like you just have to spend time with these because they just, like you have to explore and see what works and what doesn't. And you're always like impressed on both sides. Drew, great question on like how safe is it to share company data on these tools? I'm curious, folks in chat, if you can share kind of how you view it or how you use it. There's a couple different ways to think about it. Is one, obviously, all of these tools have enterprise agreements where at least they say they don't use your data to train their models. I don't know if they're honest or not, but at least that's what they say, right? Um, the other way that I've seen folks do is they'll actually host a LLM locally. The Zoom Info controller talks about this quite a lot, where they've built the tool kind of locally themselves and give everyone at the company access to it, and they've seen some really incredible use cases from it. But then it's also like in that case they know it's fully secure. In that case, like you actually need an engineer at least to help you stand it up and put it together. So it's not always something you can do at smaller companies. But if like you're very concerned about privacy there, and that's the best way to do it. The other way you can think about it is like they probably have access to all this stuff anyway. So even if you're uploading stuff, it may know those things already. So you might be okay there.
Yeah, Drew, I think like honestly, I think the enterprise agreement is probably like the biggest like legal protection you have is if you're loading company data, make sure you're doing it not as like a personal user, but make sure it's kind of like in a company, like workspace. From the legal side, that's probably like the best protection that you have. From a like enforceability, like how do you know that like Claude isn't going to take your stuff or like OpenAI isn't going to take your stuff? I think like, I agree with Steven. It's like I personally don't know how I would audit that, but I believe that at some point in the future, somebody might be smart enough, maybe with a different LLM, to like back test and like see what's in there. So I do think that this, by the way, is like one topic where I see, you know, startups, faster growing companies in this kind of like ecosystem having fundamentally different approaches and mindsets from like, man, when like I actually don't know what like Goldman Sachs does, but I can tell you that like the 2014 mindset when I worked there was like NFW, are we gonna like let our analysts like log in and like put in this information? We're gonna build our own LLM. I think they're doing other things now, like maybe folks like work there and can opine. But I do know that that is like a real struggle that folks at larger companies have, is getting that buy-in. Main thing I can say is like relying on enterprise agreements, which we do every day for other things, should be like proper legal backstopping.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just note, if anybody in here is entrepreneurial, someone's going to make a lot of money figuring this out, right? Because even if we shouldn't be worried about safety, like even if Anthropic whatever is actually not sharing our data with enterprise agreements, there's still that fear, right? And so if you know someone building in this or you have good ideas here, like you should go do it, because someone's going to build the LLM that like the bankers feel secure with, and they're going to make $1 billion.
Perfect. And by the way, for that board deck example that I show in a sec, I'm gonna upload like a deck that I know is gonna give like bad results, and I'm gonna show that example. But I'm also happy to get like blind tested if anyone has like a presentation with publicly available information or just like something that's like okay, to send me. If you want to like shoot me an email, craig@getalef.com, or I don't know if you're allowed to put attachments in Wistia. I'm happy to like, get pop quizzed and like live use that example too. All right. So I think before we go into the click by click demos, it's been like a really active Q&A session. And so I'd love to get kind of like the quick like vibe test of, from a practicality perspective, where are we, and like, do we need to like take a step back to take a step forward? Are we like doing good pacing? And anything else before we start showing some examples? And maybe like while we wait for like those questions to trickle in, Stephen, like how much time do you find yourself interacting with LLMs on like day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting, and I'm curious. Maybe JT, you said I really appreciate you said I'm over my skis here. We have a team member that runs the LLM locally on a high power laptop. Data never leaves her CPU. If you can you say more about that in the comments? I think that'd be really interesting for folks to learn from. Is that person on the finance team? Was that their idea? Did you tell them to do that? Kind of what happened to enable that for you? Because I can imagine the other 300 people that are currently in here, 400 folks, whatever, could really learn from that. I would love to implement that on their own teams. And then Ross, we'll get to some more examples as well pretty quickly. So this is I thought this would be fun. This is more fun than I even thought it would be. Greg, the funny thing is like I both use it all the time, and I feel like I'm not using it enough either. Is like we're at an interesting stage at Rillet as like an early stage startup where execution is like all that matters, and a lot of what we're doing is just kind of pure throughput. Is like do whatever we can to make things work, right? But I find these really helpful in terms of both, like I said, anything that's like word related. So lots of like email revision, lots of like even like negotiation sometimes where I'm like, man, I know I want to come back to this person with something, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. I'm definitely a softer person personally. So I need AI to help me like turn up my language and say, hey, is this too soft? Am I not being hard enough on these things? It's also really good for contract review as well. I use it for that a lot to flag like, hey, what am I missing here? Is there something here that should be here that's not? Or something that I need to see. That's where I find it to be really helpful in kind of just day-to-day basis.
Amazing. Yeah. So with that, I want to dive in and show some examples. So I think one of the hardest parts for folks sometimes can be, how do you get started? Like, I want to use LLMs more. I want to figure out kind of like, what do I do? And so we figured it could be a great opportunity to just kind of like screen share a little bit and show you around. So I'm going to go through one example. Steven's going to go through a really cool example that actually like leverages kind of like the Rillet MCP. Aleph has one also, by the way, that's in a private beta for our customers who want to enroll. And with that, I'm going to resume screen share here. Can everybody see my screen okay again?
Yeah,
amazing.
That's great.
So I have a kind of like a couple of different like options open here. I want to start with ChatGPT. I think they get the privilege to start first because they were the oldest, or at least like ChatGPT was kind of the breakthrough. But really, kind of like when you're first logging in, there's this element of like you can ask anything. I don't want to cover too much like these prompts. Where I actually want to start is with projects. So if anyone isn't using projects, I think it's really valuable in cases where you start your chat with, let me give you some context before I dive in. So like sometimes you might find yourself saying, I am a CFO at a B2B software company. Like with that context, help me answer this question. And a great way to use projects is you can have basically like standing prompts that answer questions. So if I wanted to create, for example, a new project, I can name it anything. So this can be like my CFO advisor project. And once I create that project, is it should a lot of what the only difference is you can give files as context. that is like a standing additional prompt that's going to help you basically like articulate whatever it is that you need to communicate. So these prompts, by the way, they can be like many different file formats. They can be Word files, text files, presentations, PDFs. There's kind of like a lot of different things that you can put in here. I hear that my audio is like breaking out. Is it better now?
Yeah, you're fixed now. If you could run your audio through the LLM to improve it, that'd be great.
Yeah, exactly. So basically the idea is now that I've created this like CFO advisor project, I can add files as context. How do I build context? I want to like tell it about being a CFO. What is a great tool I can use to do that? How about an LLM? So just to be equal opportunity here, I'm going to go into Claude. And you can see I actually already have like a Claude project in here too. It's not just like a ChatGPT thing. Like all these LLMs have these projects, and so the idea is like help me, write a prompt for a project that is my CFO advisor. Some additional context about us. And then I can say, like, we're a software company. I can have it linked to our website. I can have it run deep research on my company and have it figure out like a lot of all this other stuff. And so the idea is I can start with this, fill in some information, and this will actually probably do a pretty good job of writing a little bit about the prompt or even help me ideate how I want to use it. I can then take this, copy and paste it as a file in my context. And now whenever I ask it a question, it'll basically refer to that context and be informed by that as it delivers its answer.
Yeah. This is something that I remember someone sharing with me that was like an aha moment, is actually using the AI to create better prompts for you. And I was like, oh, why didn't I think about that? Right? It's like, it knows what prompts are good. Why don't I just ask it? And so now I can say like, hey, I want to build a prompt for a technical accounting memo. What additional detail is helpful in order to build the best prompt possible? Right.
Yeah. And there's actually a great question on how do you keep context up to date? So for example, I might here be giving it some general information, and I might be saying like, oh, we're a company doing this, but that doesn't help me with how were last month's financials. It doesn't help me with like what is in my current like base case forecast and like how can that inform what I want to communicate. I think, Stephen, this is an amazing segue to pivot to MCPs. So I would say that like as we think about how AI can be leveraged for finance use cases, there are like just more and more growing and growing use cases. I think like Dan pointed out in the chat that just like the models are getting better, there's more that you can do. And MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. And basically the idea is that as you start working with a lot of these kind of like cutting edge, like AI focused startups, they increasingly, Rillet and Aleph being like two among them, have ways where basically you can give context on your environment that lives in that software to the LLM so that it's context for the model to inform things like your projects. So with that, Stephen, I think you have a pretty cool example. I might turn screen share over to you and let you show us around.
Great. Okay, I'm going to pull up Claude code here, or I guess Claude, sorry. Can everyone see my desktop here? Awesome. Okay, so we're going to look at like setting up MCP in Rillet, or like with Claude and Rillet. What's cool here is the like MCP is now across lots of vendors. So like Ramp is MCP, Aleph is MCP, Rillet does, Stripe does. It feels like in my head, like MCP feels like it came out like a year ago and it's not cool anymore. That's not the case. I don't know if there's just hype and it died or if it got better or what, to be honest there. But I have found like it actually works really well and can give you kind of quick context to build your own tools on top of these. So like at Rillet, for example, we released MCP 2 weeks ago. We've already had, I think, 5 or 10 customers build on it. So one built an FP&A analyst, one is booking journal entries directly from Claude into Rillet. Another one built their own custom ARR dashboard from it. And these are like CFOs, right? These are not developers, but it's folks building on top. So here's a quick example here, kind of I forget who said it earlier. I think it was Shaw. You said like that kind of the context here. So here, like I've talked with Rillet a bunch, but I ask, is Rillet connected now? It's like, I don't have any context on Rillet. What's going on? And then I start providing more context and it's like, oh, okay, I can give you stuff here. So here, like I'm trying to set up my connection to MCP and it's not working. But what's great about this is I can just chat with Claude directly in this instance. I don't need to go somewhere else. I can go directly within this instance. And it looks like my connection might be unstable. I think we're having issues with the screen sharing. Am I okay? Okay. So maybe I'll limit screen sharing so we keep connection up. But basically, like my point is here, what's great about this is like as I'm trying to figure out how to connect my Rillet MCP to Claude, I can just ask Claude directly. I don't need to go to a separate instance. I don't need to open ChatGPT or a separate window. I just do it all here, and it literally helps me troubleshoot. Right? Like it's telling me, hey, open up, this in Mac. I don't know how to do this, right? I'm not a developer. How do I find this? So then I ask, like, okay, how do I find this, right? I say I have Cloud Desktop. How do I do 2.1? It says Open Finder. Go to Command Shift G. So like it's teaching me step by step how to do these things. This is what I love about how these LLMs are set up. And I can do this for all kinds of customer support all the time. I was trying to install like my Ring camera the other day. Once again, having issues. The Ring support really sucked. Instead, I went through the LLM, asked questions, and can just keep giving it feedback, and it helps me out here. So I guess I'm moving a little too slow here, but point is here, like you can set this up, ask questions of it as you go. You can see like this gets really long, right? This took me like, I think I was an hour and a half to finally get this set up. Lots of questions here. Finally, once I've got it set up, then I can start to ask questions directly, where I can ask, for my AR waterfall report, and it directly pulls it out of the system. I can say like, can you pull it, by each month? And it pulls it together here in these key changes and gives me some key insights here. I can chart it on a graph directly. And so you can see even then directly. So once I've got it set up, now I put a project together called Rillet MCP. And now I can start kind of doing work here directly. And so if any of you have written SQL before, there's like the star table method where you can pull everything that's directly, on the table there. So here I'm doing the same thing. Like what are the endpoints I have access to? I can see entities, revenue, billing, financial management, reporting, custom fields, right? So then I can say, oh, I have, contracts in here. I would do this live, but sometimes it takes a while, and especially when we're screen sharing, it gets even worse. But I can say, hey, show me number of contracts created per month in 2025. It pulls up the contracts. Great. Show me in a table. Puts it in a table. I can say, let's add in total ARR and net new ARR, right? Now I can ask for a chart as well, and it's going to put the chart together for me. I then add like another table down here with number of contracts, new ARR. It can do math as well, right? So like these things can get really good really fast. Once again, I'm not a developer. I have no clue what I'm doing, but just the fact that I can connect directly to my own Rillet instance, my own Rillet data, and start to pull this data in, mind blowing, right? Now, like the next step here would be to actually use Claude Code to build an app on top of this. So I don't have to ask for these things every time, right? It just immediately refreshes as you go. And so that's it for me, Craig.
Amazing, man. I think this stuff is just so cool. Like man, what a time to be alive is kind of how I feel. And I think this is one of those areas where I remember thinking back to like, 2020, 2021, where there was kind of this like hype cycle in crypto. And I can just say, like, speaking for myself personally, I struggled to really like understand it. And LLMs, it just felt like I kept seeing more use cases and more use cases and more use cases and more use cases. And so the main like mental framework as you're trying to get started, as you're trying to like upskill yourselves, and the framework that's really helped me, at least personally, is go think about things that you spend a lot of time on. And if you understand the landscape of like where are LLMs good, where can AI be helpful, apply that lens of how can this save me time. And I think sometimes you might find that you can fully automate a role. I think there are like areas of like startup infrastructure, like legal, where you have a lot of companies that like don't have a general counsel for a lot longer. There are other areas like with engineering where things like Claude Code are like basically leveling up how quickly engineers can turn things. And increasingly, I think like some of the internal use cases I've seen for our engineering team can even be like non-engineers can ask Claude Code context about our code base and say, like, where in the code does it say this? It'll tell you. Then you can say, like, oh, like, can we change it to do this? And then like Claude can basically like write and like open a PR itself. So there can be like an engineer that reviews it, but like increasingly one that like built V1 but not V2. So it's just like a really amazing time to be alive. I think there's like a question on like which tool is better, and I think the answer is like every month it's changing. I think if we were talking a year ago, the answer was like unequivocally like ChatGPT, and like OpenAI had the lead. Um, and like Google and Gemini was behind. That was like a year ago what was true. And I think now like there are moments where like Gemini, which is like Google's offering, has the best model. There are, moments where it's Claude. And so I think like my biggest recommendation is try to not limit yourself to just one.
Yeah. And then there's a good question in the chat about like relative value of like, or where was it? Like validating things. It's a good question. In some ways, like the best way is to do it manually. Like in that case there, right? Like previously I actually asked for revenue by customer and it was like $900 for customers. And I'm like, wait, that's wrong. I know that's wrong. And then I looked in the data, it was just pulling a single invoice by customer instead of summing up all the invoices, right? So there's some like manual checking you have to do there. And then once you get comfortable, it becomes a lot easier, obviously to like trust it, but it takes a lot of validation in the meantime. Not to shop my own, like, hawk my own software as well, but that is then the benefit of like going through a vendor, right? Like this is why I think even like this build versus buy, there's a big build versus buy debate happening on Twitter right now where people, are saying, hey, I vibe coded my own CRM over the weekend and killed Salesforce. Like this is where this like validation piece actually becomes really important. Is a vendor like Rillet, for example, on Aleph, like will provide backlinks to everything. So you can go through and validate that information yourself very easily. So there's a lot like deeper level of trust there. And even like with models changing and updating as well all the time, I do think it's really important that we as individuals, can do these things ourselves. And also like there is a benefit to going through a vendor or model that like Rillet has incentive to have the best model up to date all the time. And it's going to have people dedicated to figuring out what the best model is and how to use it. And that then becomes something you can just access through Rillet. And so there is like benefit to going through vendors, and also exactly to Craig's point, like I think it's going to keep changing and it's going to be a lot of us figuring out, where to go. It reminds me a bit of like the browser wars back in the day. Yeah, it's like Chrome and Firefox and Internet Explorer and like which browser was better. Eventually, like they kind of all become the same, but you all have your own preference at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I think it also gets to a great question, that I get asked sometimes, which is, why do Aleph and Rillet exist in a world of abundant AI? Like, why can't like, we all have our own, Claude is our only like software that we use for tooling. And I think at the end of the day, those tools, like there is some point where the singularity might come and they can do everything, but that point is not today. And so while we don't live in that world, I think they're really focused on generalist experience. And tools like Aleph, tools like Rillet are really focused on workflows. And so I think that is kind of like the core distinction, is having kind of like a single, system of record or a source of truth for a particular arrangement of data that people like to consume in a particular type of way, that they like to share with other stakeholders who like to consume it in a different type of way. And I think that's sort of like the, realm in which we operate. And I think why a lot of these kind of like vertical software tools that are increasingly leveraging AI in their product are still fundamentally workflow tools that are leveraging a lot of this AI. And so we're happy every time like new models come out that are productive and helpful, because they help make our product better. And they help kind of like reach everyone here, kind of like where you are and how you like to work.
Cool. Yeah, there's so many good questions in the chat, as well as like so many examples. I think maybe Greg, what you and I can do after this in kind of the follow-up email, a lot of these use cases folks are sharing, we can kind of aggregate and send in the follow-up email, because Chris just had a good example of how he'll like use Claude in the morning and just let it run. All he does is kind of normal day. And then Baha, I'd love to hear more examples. You said like you use Replit to build internal finance tools for repetitive tasks. I'd love to hear what you've built. That's exactly what we're trying to figure out kind of here. Tom, you had a good question about the tools comparing between each other. Like, could you upload a single prompt and then compare between Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT? Not that I know of, but you might be able to vibe code an app that would do that. So, or maybe somebody here can figure it out and make a bunch of money.
Yeah, I mean, so Tom, like, there's like one way of doing it is like the manual way is you can just copy and paste outputs from one and give them as like prompt inputs to the other. So you can like share specific outputs that you get. But if, for example, you have information that lives in two different systems and you need to combine them in like a more ongoing way, the first thing I try to think is like, why do you need two different systems? Like you might be able to do it all in one. Could be like one consideration there. I do want to show this board deck reviewer. So I might take 5 minutes just to show like a quick example. And then one thing that Baha was mentioning was a tool called Riplet. I want to give them like a little bit of a shout out. There are a few tools kind of like this, but basically the idea is like if you're thinking about ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity as a chatbot experience where you ask it questions and it kind of like gives you results. One of the things that you might want to do is like create an output, create an app, create a like scalable thing that like does stuff. And I want to show kind of like a couple examples quickly. So the first is you can actually do something like this in Claude, and actually like but in Claude, this is like kind of like a fun hack is that if you use the term like artifact, like create an artifact that is a calculator, or something like this. It's this kind of like artifact term that actually can help spin up like mini apps for you in a way that like, you see here, it's not just like giving like a chat output. It's like actually going to create a little app for me. So this is kind of like one example is like artifact, kind of like the keyword in Claude. Can do here like some kind of cool stuff. And then on top of that, there's like, yeah, so your big back is there, and it gave me my header. So 8 times 5, hopefully 40, and it is. So there you go. I built a calculator. So I think this is like one example of this working in Claude, but I think like Riplet is like a great example of a tool that can seamlessly stand up like standalone apps for you. So this is like inside of Riplet. I give it like this very simple prompt, like make this. It like thought for a while. It like did a bunch of stuff. And then I say like, great, now like, I can upload like an API key. But I basically, all right, it's working for a few minutes and I posted it. It even created like a website for me that I can like copy and paste here and generate this like app for me. You can also go back and forth with Riplet. And if you do back and forth, back and forth, back and forth enough, you can actually get something that looks like this. And so you can see that here, this is sort of my like presentation validator. So the idea is you can upload like a Google slide URL as long as the permissions are set to anyone with the link can view, or you can drop in a PowerPoint and then click validate presentation. Running this, I'm not saying I like optimized it for speed, but it does work. So it takes a couple of minutes, like it takes like 10, 12 minutes usually. But the idea is like if you upload something and then do it, that the output kind of looks like this. And so I mentioned that I like intentionally gave it like a deck with like a lot of like errors that I added and stuff. But you can see it does like a pretty interesting job, which is I took this PowerPoint. It's a very harsh grader because it contains deal breaker issues. And you can see there's like all of this category scoring in it, where it's basically like I one by one, this is like not AI. This is like I said, like, what are elements of a board deck that I want to be right as I think about like reviewing it myself. I want internal notes. There were like no notes, or like several slides with no notes, no conflicting numbers. Are numbers consistent in use of decimal places? Is there visual consistency? And then there's all these different findings. So like, is the appropriate chart type being used for data getting presented? And as I go in here, there's like, no charts presented on the slide. So it's like not applicable. So it moves on. But like on this one, there's like a slide with like, there's like no visualization. It's just like making a claim. Classic sales deck material. So, it's like stuff like that where
Awesome.
it's kind of like looking into a lot of this detail in a pretty neat way.
That's awesome. I was going to ask, how long did it take you to build that?
Yeah, so the V1 of that presentation validator got built by our CEO. He says it took him 3 hours, but it's worth noting that like in Albert time, you kind of have to multiply everything by 10. So I think like for a normal person like me, it would take like a lot longer. And then just kind of like building and iterating on top of it. It's like what you put in is what you get out. It can be as simple as like change this criteria to be more forgiving. Add the fact that like you missed, that like there is a way that we like approach grammar in presentations that is more direct. It can be like those sorts of like tweaking once the actual like app and artifact is built. So order of magnitude, I think if like someone here were starting it from scratch with a lot of this kind of like background, I would estimate it's probably like 30 hours, like it's a lot of work. But if you think about how much time you spend reviewing board decks and how happy you are with the output, you might be spending like 10 hours, every quarter doing this. And so it's like if you do it once, it's like paying dividends for forever. And then you can use it for all sorts of presentations. There's nothing special about it being a board deck.
Right. And frankly, the things you're probably missing by doing it manually, right?
Yeah.
I think what's cool about that is like maybe kind of takeaway framework for all of us is one, like it can take a while to build these things. And so let's just admit none of us are developers or coders here. And if you remember, like, I don't know, think about like building a model in Excel, right? Like it takes quite a while and we're going to make mistakes as we go. And then, oh man, like you all know, right? Where you build this model and something's not working and you spend like an hour trying to find that one formula that you didn't put together correctly or something like that, right? So like it's the same thing here with building these tools. And there is some like push through required there. And there's a million of like framework there is there's some like stepping back to step forward is how I think about it. Is I know a controller who built his own agent to read checks. So he'll get his checks sent to a lockbox and then has to review those manually every single day, every single week, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes, right? But it's like, it's a process. And he's like, I wonder if ChatGPT could do this. And so he spent, I think it was 5 or 10 hours kind of developing the app at first. And the frustrating part was that it didn't work. Like the model wasn't good enough. And like sometimes a vendor or our customer would pay 3 invoices at once with a single check. Sometimes like all the checks are different or like different structures, whatever. But then the new model came out and he spent another hour kind of refactoring it and using the new model. And then it worked finally. So now like he doesn't even review those checks manually anymore. They go into the lockbox, go into a Google Drive, LLM reads it. He then downloads the CSV, uploads that into his ERP, auto reconciles it. Right. And once again, like this is not a developer. Like this is just a controller that was so pissed off that he had to keep doing this very manual check paying system that frankly customers should stop paying in checks, but they're going to, right? So instead, like built this new tool and now it works. But the things there is one, like take a step back, right? It takes 5 to 30 minutes a day, it takes him 10 to 15 hours to build this up front. And so, ROI is maybe 3 to 4 months there, kind of all in. But then also like you have to keep iterating on it and then even like testing it with new models to see if it, can work at the end of the day.
Stephen, as you're talking about like how you define like ROI for a project, and even how I was talking about like the, how many hours did it take? How many hours do you get back? I do think that, one of the frameworks that I have for approaching this is there's like, layer 1 ROI, which is you spend time doing stuff today. How much time can you save if you devote the time to like build something with AI that automates some of that. But there's also like a level 2 to that, which is if you spend the time to get good at using AI to automate one thing, it will now take you less time to use AI to automate the second thing and the third thing. And so there's like, if you're really struggling with like ROI on getting started, I do think there's an element of, the more you use it, the better you will get at it. And therefore, there are more valid use cases for you to use it. The other, third order component that is, I think, really exciting, like very exciting and a little bit scary for us as kind of like finance folks is like, what does AI sophistication mean for career trajectory and longevity? And I do think like increasingly expectations on like what each of us can do individually is growing for better or for worse. And so I think it's like one of those, no time like the present to be, someone who's like trying to think about maximizing leverage.
Yeah, agreed. We've got about 10 minutes left. Maybe let's go through some of the Q&A here, if we can, and answer. So Lindsay, you had a good question earlier. You said these example prompts are helpful. What if we wanted to come up with our own ad hoc prompts? What constitutes good quality versus poor quality? I guess like two general tips to keep in mind is like, one, you can literally ask the LLM, is this a good prompt? If not, help me make it better. I've also seen kind of two varying approaches in that sometimes I'll see people come in with, hey, tell the LLM, you are a top rate CFO, you're really good at this, blah, blah, blah. I've also seen the other side where you say, hey, you're actually a really bad CFO, right? Like kind of approach it from the other way and kind of work against it. I've seen like varying qualities. Like I'm not sure exactly the best way to do it there, but I've seen some folks take on a different approach there and try to challenge the AI a bit and not be overconfident there. Because if you just say, hey, you're a really good CFO, it may actually be overconfident. Whereas if you're like, you're actually mediocre and you have to work really hard, it may give you a better output there than kind of assuming confidence.
Yeah. There's a question from Ben around like, if you're evaluating all sorts of these tools, like how do you pick one over the other? And I think like there's like some layer of like, there are some people who you might know and trust who might have ideas, which is great. But at the end of the day, I really like Chris's suggestion in response to that, which is just like, try it. Ask for like a chance to use it yourself and play around with it. And it should be really leading with things you use, things that you are happy, actively using. You can see that it works for you more than like, I think this might work in the future, so I'm going to invest a lot of time up front. I think we are in a world where you can, de-risk these things like a lot more than you used to be able to.
Yep. Jill, you got a question about what tools you pay for at what levels to accomplish some of these use cases. So great question. Like Anthropic, for example, is just monthly. I think it's like 40 or 20 or 40 a month. I'd have to go check. Lovable as well. I use very similar to Replit. I think that one's also 20 to 30 a month. So honestly, they're not super expensive. Frankly, it's a little scary. It's a bit like the kind of the DoorDash, Uber Eats days, where like VC is clearly subsidizing this and they are burning tons of money. And at some point, these things will get very expensive. So in some ways, I'm like, we should all use it now while it's very cheap, while the VCs are kind of subsidizing our play here, because at some point it will get expensive. But in short, like these tools are all very cheap. I've seen two ways that kind of finance leaders have encouraged adoption across their teams, or maybe like quite a lot of ways. Is one, sometimes I'll see folks put it in the budget directly. It's like, hey, department, here is your budget for AI tools. Do whatever you want with it, right? If you're going to use ChatGPT, you want to buy a specific tool for like whatever it is, I don't care, but like here's budget for it. That creates incentive for folks to go kind of spend on AI tools. The other way I've seen is to put it in performance reviews. I'm not really a big stick guy, but if you prefer that over the carrot, that's how your culture works. I've seen folks put it in performance reviews directly. I've also seen some of the larger AI companies actually track how their employees are using the LLMs. So literally like we'll follow like how often they're using ChatGPT, what prompts are they doing? That's a little too big brother for me, but it is a way to see like, hey, who is actually using AI on the team? Are they following through with this? Are they creating use cases? So there are ways you can do that.
There is another question around feeling like whether it's like roadblock by not knowing how to do like the what's next or the so what. I think this is related to writer's block too. It's related to just that hurdle of like, I've done something, but there is a barrier to the next thing. Man, I think LLMs are pretty good at like helping that too. So like the specific example was, I've had AI like build the code for a tool, but then I don't know how to release it to the wild. I think there might be an element of you might say like, you are, advising a startup, you're a CTO, like, how do I get this posted and released? What are, security protocols that I should implement to make it secure? So I think there's like elements of, the LLM should be able to guide you at what's next too. And even if you're like, I don't know what to do next, it might even be like a good idea generator there. So it's sort of like the meta answer, but kind of an interesting one.
Yeah, agreed. And in terms of deployment, what's nice about so like Claude, for example, you can deploy it on your desktop, which obviously isn't as helpful. Lovable and Replit, you can do it publicly. So I built, let me show this for example. This is not hawking my own software, which is good. But I built a website called Close Club Careers. We have a group at Rillet called the Close Club. It's a Slack group and community of just accountants and finance leaders. And we built like this career page where if you're looking for a job or if you're looking to hire someone, you can submit kind of your info here. This is entirely coded on Lovable, right? I published this into the wild. I had to go buy a domain for this, but Lovable will walk you through how to do this, or you can actually host it on Lovable directly or Replit directly, but then it'll be like lovable.dev or replit.app or whatever it is. So you can buy a domain for it or kind of host it directly like this. And then what's nice about this is like I can prove the use case and say, hey, this is working. And then we can go, I don't know, add it to our website, or then I can go talk to the engineers about building it in a Snowflake or something like this, right? But this is like helped me prove the use case directionally how I want to, and then we can kind of take it anywhere we want from there.
Perfect. I think as we wrap up here, there's like one other question that was sort of like, are you using Sonnet exclusively? Do you also use Opus? When do you use Opus? The more like meta topic is like, when you have a choice of which model to use, like how do you pick which one you use? My sort of like silly answer is I do what the AI tells me. I try not to like overthink it too much. So in the example I did earlier where I built the calculator, basically I was just using, I think I was just using Sonnet 4.5 and Claude because that's what it suggested. But if, by the way, I like, could have used Opus and it's sort of like telling me when one's better than the other, there was no real like thinking to that. It was more just I used what was there and it gave me a pretty good answer. Perfect. So I think, yeah, like Stephen, any closing thoughts as we wrap up here? Yeah, I just want to thank everyone. This has been by far the most interactive webinar, and relatedly very well attended for folks who joined. So thank you so much for doing this, and yeah, would love to hear like feedback too on how it went. Was it helpful to you? Are there any other things that we should be doing for similar events in the future?
Yep, please. And yeah, if this was helpful, like, I don't know, let's do it again. All right. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We will, like I said, we'll go put all this chat through an LLM and find out what examples people shared and kind of share them out. And then I don't know, maybe I'm overselling here, Craig, but it would be cool to pull some folks from here. If you've built something, please let Craig and I know. Maybe we can show it at the next webinar, right?
I love that. Yeah.
That's like an example that you can share. Either like you can ping Stephen at Rillet.com, or is it just Craig at Aleph.com?
Yeah, Craig at Get Aleph.
Get Aleph, yeah. Nice. We'll also, I'm sure our marketing teams will send you follow-ups as well, so you can just respond to that. But if you have cool use cases that we can share with the community, like please do. We can make this really fun. So thank you all for coming.
On a personal note, Stephen is like my fellow kind of like finance person wandering into the wild of startups. It's extra fun to do this with you. So thanks so much for doing this, and I'm sure we'll do it again soon.
Awesome. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Have an awesome week.
Cheers.